Have you ever wondered what would happen if Zuko was reborn with all of his memories and powers from his past life? Could he prevent every tragedy that happened in the original timeline? And how would he change the entire narrative of Avatar: The Last Airbender? Now, these are indeed excellent questions, but we first must answer the most important question of all. How would this even happen in the first place? Well, you see, Zuko lives to a very old age in the world of Avatar. Long after the events of The Legend of Korra, he passes away peacefully, having spent a lifetime building the world that he and his friends bled for. His spirit, carrying the weight of a full and extraordinary life, is drawn to the spirit world. And it is here that Zuko is met by none other than his uncle Iroh. They spend a long, deeply warm moment together, the two of them simply sitting, drinking jasmine tea the way they always used to. Zuko tells Iroh everything, every regret, every person he wished he could have saved sooner, the years of war that never fully left his bones. And more than anything, he tells Iroh how much he wishes he could have done it all differently, reached the people he loved, like his sister Azula, before the world had a chance to break them first. And it is here that Iroh smiles that warm, knowing smile of his, sets down his tea, and tells Zuko about the Tree of Time. Now, what exactly is the Tree of Time, you might ask? Well, you see, the Tree of Time is a spiritual repository of memories. Think of it as a living archive that binds the consciousness of every soul who has ever touched the balance of the world. Iroh takes Zuko to the tree's location. Once inside, the tree reacts to his presence, offering something entirely unprecedented. But before the energy of the tree can fully take him, Iroh looks his nephew in the eye and asks one simple question. If given the chance to change everything, would you take it? Without a single second of hesitation, Zuko says yes. The tree pulls Zuko's consciousness across the decades, sending his mind all the way back to the exact moment of his birth. And it is here that everything truly begins. When Zuko finally opens his eyes, he finds himself trapped in a newborn's body. Tiny arms, tiny feet, no firebending, no dual broadswords, nothing. He can't even hold his own head up. Naturally, he is terrified and completely confused. For the first few months, all he can do is observe. He watches the massive faces looming over his crib, listens to the muffled voices of the Fire Nation Palace, and waits, genuinely wondering if the tree actually worked at all. But then, slowly and unmistakably, it becomes clear. He recognizes the palace walls. He recognizes the faces. He recognizes the life he is living all over again. It doesn't take long for Zuko to realize that the tree worked. He has been reborn inside his own body, with every single memory from his past life completely intact. He makes a promise to himself right then and there. He will not waste this golden opportunity. A couple of years pass, and Zuko is now 5 years old, and already things are very different from what we know. You see, Zuko knows better than anyone that firebending cannot be rushed. His chi pathways are still those of a young child, too fragile for the kind of power he mastered in his first life. So instead of forcing it, he trains with an intention and patience that no 5-year-old in Fire Nation history has ever had. Breathing exercises, stances, the foundational forms drilled with the precision of a master reacquainting himself with skills that were always his to begin with. But training is only half of what Zuko focuses on at this stage, because here in the palace, he begins making his most important early move, his sister, Azula. In the original timeline, Azula orbited their father while Zuko stayed close to their mother, Ursa. We all know how that turned out. Ozai fed Azula's desperate hunger for validation, turned her extraordinary talent into a weapon, and eroded every part of her that could have chosen a different path. Zuko knows exactly how that story ends. And in this version of the story, he is not going to allow it to happen again. From the very beginning, Zuko treats Azula not as a rival, but as a younger sister worth protecting. He praises her genuinely, without competition, without jealousy. He bridges the gap between her and Ursa before Ozai can drive a wedge through it. When Ozai tries to use Azula's talents to manipulate her, Zuko steps in carefully, subtly, the way only someone who already knows every move on the board possibly can. Because of that, Azula begins to see through their father's games far earlier than she ever did before. She stops being his weapon. The result is a version of Azula the show never gave us. She is still brilliant. She's still fiercely competitive and absolutely lethal, but she grows up feeling loved by her brother, by her mother, and rather than descending into the sociopath her father engineered, she becomes something far more interesting. Moving forward, Zuko makes no effort to hide his contempt for Ozai, and Ozai picks up this hatred much earlier than in the original story, making him once again a #1 hater of his son. However, his hatred of Zuko is even stronger in this version of the story. Fast forward 6 years later, Zuko is now 11 years old, and he is formidable in a way that has no business existing in an 11-year-old. His firebending already far surpasses where the original Zuko was at this stage, and he has already mastered lightning redirection. A lifetime of memory means every session has purpose, every technique lands exactly where it's supposed to, every drill is the work of a master refining rather than a student discovering. The body is young, the mind is ancient. Zuko is seen as a prodigy by everyone else, and even his #1 hater, Ozai, acknowledges his strength in this timeline. Now, it's at age 11 that Zuko really makes his first truly crucial change to the entire timeline, the change that reshapes everything else. Lu Ten, Iroh's son, Zuko's cousin. Lu Ten's death during the siege of Ba Sing Se was, without a doubt, the single most consequential event in the entire lead-up to the final years of the 100-Year War. It broke Iroh completely. That grief, that devastating loss, was what pushed one of the greatest warriors the Fire Nation ever produced to abandon everything, to sit in a prison cell and find peace in it, to choose tea over conquest, and to become the man who would one day teach Zuko everything that actually mattered. But it cost him his son. And Zuko loves Lu Ten too much to watch it happen twice. He remembers every detail of how Lu Ten died, the date, the specific Earth Kingdom ambush that the Fire Nation forces never saw coming. When the day of the siege comes up, right before Lu Ten's regiment is set to depart, he slips a detailed strategic warning through the White Lotus, a society he knows will one day become one of the most important forces for balance in the world. The warning is precise enough to matter, and anonymous enough not to raise questions. The right hands receive it. The ambush never happens. They still fail at conquering Ba Sing Se, but Lu Ten comes home injured. With Lu Ten alive, Iroh returns from Ba Sing Se not as a shattered man retreating into grief, but as a general who made a choice. And Zuko, knowing exactly which questions to ask and when to ask them, begins spiritually incepting his own uncle with White Lotus philosophy years before Ba Sing Se ever needed to break him open. He asks Iroh about the Sun Warriors, about the true nature of firebending, about what the spirits actually want from the world of humans. He asks questions that no 11-year-old raised in the Fire Nation capital should know how to formulate. And Iroh, watching his young nephew speak with a depth that usually only comes after decades of loss, finds himself genuinely moved. He begins to change, not because grief forced his hand, but because wonder opened the door. He abandons the remaining campaigns willingly, begins studying the spirit world, turns toward the philosophies the Fire Nation has spent a century trying to burn. The tea, the warmth, the wisdom, it all still comes, just earlier, and without the tragedy that originally made it necessary. Now, don't get it twisted. Iroh still remains a very strict leader, but thanks to Lu Ten being alive and Zuko using his memories to explain things to Iroh, he is a way better Fire Lord than Ozai ever was in the original timeline, and the political consequences are immediate. With Iroh stepping back and Lu Ten alive as a clear line of succession, Ozai's path to the throne disappears entirely. He will never become Fire Lord through Azulon's death. Ursa never has to make the choice she made. She is never banished. The family stays together. But Ozai does not accept this. That is not who he is. Denied the throne and denied any visible leverage, he becomes a shadow political operator, quietly building a faction of loyalist generals who believe Iroh is weak and that the Fire Nation under Lu Ten will throw away a century of hard-won conquest. He funds them in secret. He meets with them in rooms no one is supposed to know about. He waits with the particular patience of a man who has decided that the throne is still his, and that the only question is when, not whether, it will happen. And he hires Combustion Man, not to hunt the Avatar this time, but as a Black Ops assassin with one specific job: eliminate Lu Ten, eliminate Iroh, clear the path to the throne by any means necessary. The threat builds entirely out of sight, which is exactly what makes it so dangerous. Which brings us to the scar. Would Zuko still get it? Well, the answer is a big yes. You see, Ozai is a massive Zuko hater, and being furious with his son's quiet refusal to behave like a real Fire Nation prince, challenges him to a private Agni Kai. And Zuko does something remarkable. He lets Ozai burn him, not because he cannot fight back. At this point, he absolutely could, but the scar is exactly what he needs. Now, you're probably wondering why he would do this. Well, he uses Ozai's own brutality against him, bringing the unprovoked attack before Fire Lord Azula. Mulan and Crown Prince Iroh as evidence of exactly what kind of a man Ozai truly is. A man who burned his own son for the crime of being too good. Ozai is imprisoned, banished, stripped of his network. Zuko then feigns deep shame over his scar and publicly announces he is leaving the capital to hunt the Avatar and restore his honor. Nobody questions it. But in reality, this is Zuko's exit strategy. Planned, deliberate, and executed flawlessly. The scar is his cover. Everything he needs in order to be exactly where he has to be when Aang arrives is now in place. From here, events unfold pretty much the same as in the original timeline up until Aang leaves the iceberg. This is where things change a lot. Here, Zuko still decides to go on a journey to capture the Avatar. However, that is a lie. He goes to a village nearby and picks up his blue spirit mask. Why? Don't worry, you'll understand later. But now, here he handles the mission entirely differently. He knows exactly where Aang is located, but he intentionally leads his ships away from the Southern Water Tribe to avoid drawing any suspicion. Because of this, Aang never meets Zuko at the village. They never fight, and Zuko never captures Aang in this version of the story. Instead, Aang is unfrozen and begins his journey with Katara and Sokka much like he did in the original. However, a masked swordsman wielding twin Dao blades starts appearing in places he has absolutely no business being in. Whenever Zhao or any other Fire Nation forces close in on the gang, things start going wrong for the pursuers. Supplies go missing, intelligence reports vanish, escape routes suddenly open up in locations that were supposed to be dead ends. Aang, Katara, and Sokka have no idea what to make of any of this, and the mystery runs wild between them. But Zuko is patient. He knows exactly where this story goes, and he knows the right moment to reveal himself has not come yet. But there is one threat he cannot leave to chance: Zhao. You see, in the original timeline, Zhao discovered the Moon Spirit's mortal form from Wan Shi Tong's library, sailed his fleet to the Northern Water Tribe, and killed it. Waterbending was erased from the world in seconds. The balance of everything lurched catastrophically, and Princess Yue gave her life to restore what Zhao destroyed. In this version of the story, none of that happens. Zuko already knows every detail of Zhao's plan, the target, the timing, the consequences, and before Zhao's fleet ever reaches the North Pole, the Blue Spirit moves first. A man carrying the full combat experience of an 80-year-old master inside a faster, younger body against a general who is used to being the most dangerous person in every room is not a long fight. Zhao is stopped. The Moon Spirit is never touched. Tui swims peacefully in the Spirit Oasis as the gang arrives at the Northern Water Tribe, and Princess Yue, who in another life gave everything she had to restore the balance of the moon, gets to live. The gang witnesses enough of this from a distance to understand clearly that whoever is behind that mask is not their enemy. They leave the Northern Water Tribe without fear, without hatred. If anything, they find themselves genuinely curious about the Blue Spirit in a way they cannot quite shake. And Zuko follows them because he knows exactly where they're going next. By the time Ozai's loyalist forces, slowly rebuilt from the rubble of his banishment, corner the gang deep in the Earth Kingdom during Book 2, the Blue Spirit swords simply are not enough. The numbers are too overwhelming. Combustion Man is somewhere out there in the dark, and the situation is deteriorating too fast. So the Blue Spirit removes his mask. The reaction is exactly what you would expect. Katara reaches for her water immediately. Sokka grabs his boomerang. Even Aang takes a step back, because standing in front of them is Prince Zuko, the Fire Lord's nephew, the face their entire journey has associated with danger. But Zuko does not raise his hands. He speaks, and the things he tells them, specific things, details no spy or general could ever have access to, are not things anyone should know. He knows the layout of places Gang has never mentioned to a soul. He knows about Katara's mother. He knows about the White Lotus, the spirit world, things that have not happened yet. It takes time. It takes more stubbornness from Sokka than is strictly necessary, but eventually, Zuko is in. He joins Team Avatar officially halfway through Book 2 and steps into the role of Aang's firebending master far earlier than he did in the original story, without any betrayal between them, without years of misdirection. He is simply the teacher Aang needed, someone who knows exactly where the gaps are and exactly how to close them. Now, before future Zutara fans begin to rejoice in the comments section, let us just address something directly, because as the weeks on the road go by and Katara sees this version of Zuko up close, mature, empathetic, carrying a quiet and tragic wisdom that has no business being in someone his age, there's a pull there. She feels it. She's not made of stone. And this Zuko is nothing like the angry, confused boy from the original timeline. But Zuko notices this, and he stops it. He knows how much Aang loves Katara. He's seen it across an entire lifetime of memory. The depth of it, the way it anchors Aang through everything, the way that love holds a whole era of peace together. He would not change that in this timeline. Not for anything. So he steps back gently and without drama and positions himself as something Katara perhaps needs just as much as a fiercely protective friend. Someone who pushes her waterbending further than it's ever gone before. Because he knows exactly what happened to her mother Kaya, helps her carry that grief differently. The door never opens, but what forms in its place is something arguably more powerful. The Book 2 finale in this version of the story is not the Crystal Catacombs. It is something worse. Ozai, having rebuilt his loyalist network and grown tired of waiting, stops waiting entirely. He leads a personal strike team alongside Combustion Man into the Earth Kingdom with one objective: kill the Avatar in front of enough witnesses to make every wavering general fall back into line. In the chaos of the battle, Ozai corners Aang. With no other options, Aang enters the Avatar state. And Ozai, a master of the lightning generation who has spent decades preparing for a moment exactly like this one, takes a shot. Aang is struck by lightning by Ozai himself, not Azula from the shadows like in the original timeline. Ozai, on the ground, looking the Avatar dead in the eye. Watching this unfold, Zuko is absolutely shocked. The timeline has completely fractured. This is not what happened in his original life. Realizing how dire the situation is, Zuko immediately steps in. He aggressively holds off Ozai and his forces, putting his own life on the line just long enough for the gang to narrowly escape with Aang. For his ultimate betrayal, Zuko is captured, branded a traitor, and thrown into a maximum security Fire Nation prison. He only survives because Iroh steps in, fiercely demanding his nephew's immediate release. But even Iroh cannot protect him forever. Before long, Ozai strips both of them of their positions and places them under constant watch. Knowing that he has already changed too much and fearing that staying any longer will only get everyone he loves killed, Zuko escapes the capital. But before he can leave, he's discovered by Azula. She confronts him alone and demands answers. Why would he betray their nation? Why would he abandon their real family for enemies? Zuko desperately tries to explain. He tells her about the destruction ahead, about Ozai's madness, about everything their father has done, and everything he still plans to do. But despite being far healthier than her original counterpart, Azula still cannot bring herself to betray the family she spent her entire life serving. She refuses to believe Ozai could truly be beyond saving. Yet, she also cannot bring herself to turn Zuko in. In the end, she lets him go. Her only condition is that he never comes back. Zuko promises, but as he leaves, he can already feel his greatest fear becoming reality. For the first time in 2 lifetimes, he is truly losing his sister. Eventually, after weeks of searching, Zuko finally tracks down Aang and the others. By the time he finds them, Aang has survived, but is recovering slowly from Ozai's lightning. This time, however, earning their trust comes much easier. Sokka and Katara are still wary that he might be a spy. After all, he is still a Fire Nation royal prince. And meanwhile, back in the Fire Nation, Ozai is done being patient. With Sozin's comet approaching, he gathers the officers and nobles still loyal to him and marches on the capital itself. His objective is simple: take the throne by force. He publicly challenges Fire Lord Iroh to an Agni Kai for the right to rule the Fire Nation. And despite knowing exactly what kind of monster his younger brother has become, Iroh accepts, because that is exactly the kind of man he is. The battle that follows is devastating and beautiful in equal measure. Iroh bends with the breathtaking fluidity he learned from the dragons and the Sun Warriors. His flames are alive, graceful, and full of purpose. Ozai fights with none of that restraint. His fire is an overwhelming force incarnate. Lightning crashes around the battlefield. Explosions shake the palace grounds. Decades of jealousy, bitterness, and hatred pour out of him with every attack. In the end, Iroh proves why he was once considered the greatest firebender of his generation. Even empowered by the comet, Ozai cannot match his brother's mastery. Iroh outmaneuvers him, breaks through his defenses, and finally brings him to his knees. The fight is over. Or so Iroh believes, because unlike the man he became in the original timeline, this version of Iroh never experienced the loss of Loot 10. He never wandered the world searching for wisdom. He never learned from the water tribes. And because of that, he never discovered the art of lightning redirection. Showing the mercy that has always defined him, Iroh turns his back on his defeated brother. Ozai immediately takes advantage. With one final act of cowardice, he unleashes a bolt of lightning straight into Iroh's back, and the strike is fatal. Yet because Iroh himself is a master lightning generator, his body instinctively channels part of the energy away, reducing what should have been an instant death into a survivable wound. Even so, the damage is catastrophic. Royal guards rush in and finally capture Ozai, dragging the disgraced prince away in chains, while healers desperately fight to keep Fire Lord Iroh alive. Though he survives, he is left too weak to rule, and eventually withdraws from public life to recover. Ozai, meanwhile, is imprisoned beneath the capital in the most heavily guarded prison in Fire Nation history. News of the battle spreads across the world. Eventually, the truth reaches Zuko and the others. Hearing that his uncle nearly died because of Ozai's treachery fills Zuko with a fury fury he has not felt in either of his lives. More than ever, he becomes determined to ensure that Aang is ready for the battle to come. And so, much earlier than in the original timeline, Zuko begins teaching Aang firebending. He also teaches him lightning redirection exactly as he learned it from Iroh in the original. Together, they seek out the Sun Warriors. There, Aang and Zuko rediscover the true meaning of firebending and receive the blessing of Ron and Shaw. While preparing for the final battle, another memory suddenly returns to Zuko. In his original life, he never knew how Aang discovered the lion turtle, but now, with a lifetime of hindsight, he remembers the stories surrounding ancient beings older than the nations themselves. Unsure if it's merely a legend, he shares the possibility with Aang. Curious, Aang enters the Avatar state and speaks with his past lives. They tell him of the ancient lion turtles that once granted humanity the power of the elements. With hope restored, the group begins searching, and just as before, Aang eventually finds the lion turtle and learns the ancient art of energy bending. As the day of the eclipse arrives, everything changes. Unlike the original timeline, Zuko is not lost or uncertain. He carries the experience of 2 lives and knows exactly where Ozai will hide beneath the palace. He leads the invasion force directly to him. Along the way, he encounters Azula. Their meeting is painful, not hateful. Azula accuses him of returning after breaking his promise. Zuko tries one final time to convince her to leave with him. He's somewhere between a decade of conditioning and everything he's quietly watched this past year that he can't stop turning over. They go in. Iroh takes the front. That's just how he operates when he has nothing left to lose. He holds the royal guard personally while the others move through the palace. And watching him here is genuinely different from anything earlier in the story. Not impressive. Frightening. The Dragon of the West with every restraint gone. Moving through trained soldiers the way weather moves through an open field. Even the gang goes quiet watching it from across the courtyard. Then Iroh finds Aang. And here's where things begin to get serious. Because this isn't Ozai versus Aang. This is the greatest firebender who ever lived against a 12-year-old who only mastered 3 elements. The fight is brutal. Iroh is methodical and precise and completely overwhelming, working through Aang's defenses the way he works through everything. Patiently, without waste, closing every exit before Aang even sees it. Since Iroh never invented lightning redirecting, Aang is at a massive disadvantage. He tries his best to counter it by running away, but Iroh eventually gets to him. He has him pinned. It's over, or it should be. Then Aang does the only thing he has left. He opens the Avatar state, and something shifts. The Avatar state isn't just power, it's every Avatar who's ever lived, channeled through one person. He doesn't stop fighting, but he hesitates. 1 second. The first hesitation he's had in a decade, and in that second, he sees it. Not a hallucination, not a spiritual vision with dramatic lighting, just the sudden, devastating clarity of a man who was run out of things to hide behind. The war didn't honor Lu Ten, it consumed him. Everything Iroh built in his son's name would have horrified his son. The Earth Kingdom didn't take Lu Ten, the war did. The same war Iroh has been feeding for 10 years. It lands the way the truth always lands when you've been running from it long enough. Like a building coming down. He stops. He actually stops. And that's when Ozai steps out of the shadows. He's been there the whole time, watching, waiting for exactly this. The first moment in 10 years that Iroh has shown something that looks like weakness. He doesn't hesitate. He doesn't announce himself. He raises his hand and fires a full lightning strike directly into Iroh's chest. Iroh never learned to redirect, never studied the waterbenders, never sought the balance that would have taught him. The one blind spot in a decade of total war. He takes all of it, goes down hard, and the sound of it stops the room. Even Azula holds still for a second. She didn't see it coming either. Iroh on the floor of his own palace, lightning still crackling across his chest, looks up. Zuko is standing over him, not running, not falling apart, just there, looking at his uncle the way you look at someone when everything finally makes sense. Iroh has been looking at Zuko for years and seeing Lu Ten for the first time, lying here with nothing left, nothing to protect or perform or pretend. He just sees Zuko. And the weight of that after all this time is almost more than the lightning. You would have made a remarkable Fire Lord, he says. Zuko doesn't hesitate. I'm going to be one. Then he stands up and faces Ozai. What he brings into this fight isn't the cold military from the front lines hammered into him. Somewhere between the trenches and here, in a window between campaigns when nobody was watching, he found his way to the Sun Warriors. He never told Iroh. He never told anyone. He just went and he learned and he carried it quietly. Fire as life rather than destruction. Ozai has never seen it. He has no counter for it. Across the palace, Azula is still standing and Zuko isn't alone. Sokka, Toph, and Katara are right there. Azula has done the math on every fight she's ever stepped into. She's looking at 4 people who have moved together long enough that they don't need to signal each other. She's faced Zuko before. She's never faced this. She knows it before the first exchange, and it still takes everything and it still ends. Aang reaches Ozai when Zuko has worn him down. This is the moment he's been sitting with since the lion turtle. He goes all in without a single doubt, into the Avatar state, not to strike, but to reach. Beneath the fire and the patience and the decade of calculated poison, he finds the energy underneath and reroutes it. Ozai's eyes go wide. Then they go empty in a specific way. He can't feel his bending anymore. Everything he spent 10 years building and waiting for, gone. He's just a man, and not a particularly impressive one. Iroh survives. He's in bad shape for a long time, the kind you don't fully come back from. He never asks for the throne, he never takes a title. He doesn't say much about what he felt in that 1 second before the lightning hit, when 10 years of certainty fell apart all at once. But eventually, he opens a small tea shop somewhere quiet, plays Pai Sho with whoever will sit across from him, laughs at things again. It takes longer than you'd think. Now, since you made it all the way to the end of this video, check out this one as well, where we explain what would happen if Aang was reborn with his memories. What are you waiting for? Check it out!